The desert sun fell like molten copper as the last stagecoach of the evening rolled into Cripple Canyon, its wheels dragging long shadows across the lonely earth. Dust rose in swirls behind it, dancing like spirits set loose from the canyon walls. Inside the coach, Evelyn Harper gripped a small wooden trunk resting on her lap. It contained everything she owned: a dress, a comb, one pair of worn shoes, and a locket with her mother's fading photo. 19 years old, frightened and alone, yet carrying the last spark of hope she had left. The coach lurched to a halt. "End of the line," the driver yelled. Evelyn stepped down, her boots sinking slightly into the fine desert sand. The air tasted like heat and silence, the kind of silence that swallowed sound whole. She gazed around nervously, searching for the man who had written her letters. A tall figure stood beside a black horse. Straight-backed, broad-shouldered, eyes sharp as flint. He didn't move, didn't smile, just watched her like a man who had spent years studying storms and no longer feared them. Everyone in the territory knew his name: Judge Abram Colt, a man the newspapers called fair, a man the outlaws called merciless, a man the townsfolk called cursed. But to Evelyn, he was something else entirely. Her husband, a marriage arranged through letters, desperate words exchanged between two lonely souls living in two different kinds of darkness. She had said yes because she had nowhere else to go. He had said yes because he lived in a world where no one stayed long. Now they stood face to face for the first time. Abram stepped forward. "Evelyn Harper." She swallowed. "Yes, Judge Colt." "Not Judge," he said. "My wife will call me Abram." There was no warmth in his voice, only certainty, the tone of a man who made rulings that shaped lives. He extended his hand. Evelyn placed her trembling fingers in his. A chill ran up her arm. Not from cold, from something else, something she couldn't name. He guided her toward his wagon, lifting her trunk as though it weighed nothing. As he did, a group of townspeople paused to stare. Some nodded politely, some whispered. One elderly woman muttered loud enough for Evelyn to hear, "Poor child. She don't know the things that roam that ranch at night." Abram's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he helped Evelyn onto the wagon and took the reins. "Hold on." The horse jerked forward, pulling them into the barren stretch of land that separated the town from Abram Colt's isolated ranch. The long road to nowhere. The journey took nearly an hour, and not a single word was exchanged. Evelyn attempted to break the silence once. "It's beautiful out here." Abram didn't even glance at her. "The desert hides its teeth. Don't trust beauty." Evelyn folded her hands quietly in her lap. As the sun continued to fall, the road twisted through dead fields and abandoned fences. Here and there, Evelyn saw scorched patches of earth. Others looked freshly dug, like shallow graves. No animals, no birds, no sound except the creak of the wagon wheels. "Why is the land so empty?" she asked softly. Abram finally looked at her. Animals know what people ignore. She didn't ask again. When the ranch finally appeared over a ridge, Evelyn gasped. The house was massive, far larger than she imagined, with tall windows, dark wood, and a porch that wrapped around like a watchful sentinel. But something about it felt wrong. It looked cold, abandoned, a skeleton of a home rather than a living one. As they approached, Evelyn felt a prickling sensation at the back of her neck, a strange pressure in the air, like someone was watching. The house of shadows. Abram led her inside. The moment Evelyn crossed the threshold, she felt the temperature drop. The air was stale, untouched, as if no one had opened a window in years. The furniture was polished, but unnaturally neat, the kind of neatness that suggested not cleanliness, but absence. Everywhere she looked, she saw photographs. Photographs of a beautiful woman with dark hair and hauntingly sad eyes. Her smile seemed to flicker between joy and sorrow, depending on where Evelyn stood. "That's Clara," Abram said. "My first wife." Evelyn hesitated. "I'm sorry for your loss." Abram didn't respond. He simply walked on. At the end of a long hallway, he stopped at a door. "This room is yours." Evelyn blinked. "Yours? Not ours." Abram's face darkened, as if she had touched a wound that had never healed. "I sleep elsewhere," he said curtly. He placed a key in her hand. "Lock the door when night falls." Her heart tightened. "Why?" Abram looked down the hallway, the shadows behind him stretching strangely long. "This house has rules," he said quietly. "Breaking them is dangerous." Before she could ask more, he walked away, boots echoing down the wooden floor until silence swallowed him again. Evelyn stepped inside the room, locked the door, and sat on the bed. Her hands trembled. This was her new life. A lonely marriage. A cold house. A man who had ghosts inside his eyes. Or maybe, ghosts in the house itself. The first night, Evelyn lay awake for hours, staring at the wooden ceiling. The desert wind pushed against the glass. A loose shutter clapped softly in the night. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled. Then, she heard it. Creak, creak, creak. Footsteps. Soft footsteps. Delicate footsteps. The unmistakable rhythm of someone walking barefoot down the hall. But not Abram. He had heavy boots, and his stride was longer, louder. These steps were slow, measured, almost mournful. Evelyn sat up, heart pounding. A shadow appeared under the narrow gap of the door, thin, faint, but unmistakably human. She covered her mouth. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a whisper slipped through the door crack. Evelyn. Her blood turned to ice. It was a woman's voice. Soft, sad, and heartbreakingly familiar. She had heard it before. In the photographs. In her imagination. In the hollow stare of Clara Colt. Evelyn curled into herself, shaking. The whisper came again. Don't trust him. Evelyn whimpered. The floor creaked. A cold breath touched the bottom of the door. Then, silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Evelyn pressed her hands to her ears and waited until dawn's light seeped into the room before she dared unlock the door. The warning. The next morning, Evelyn found something strange on her dresser. A white ribbon, delicate, old-fashioned, lace-trimmed. She hadn't put it there. She'd never owned it. Pinned to it was a scrap of paper. A message in faded ink. He won't tell you the truth. Evelyn's breath hitched. Was this Clara? Trying to warn her? Trying to protect her? Trying to claim something? Or was it something else entirely? Before she could gather courage, Abram appeared at the doorway. You didn't come to breakfast, he said sternly. There was someone in the hall last night. Evelyn whispered. A woman. Abram's expression hardened instantly. Lock your door, he repeated. And don't open it, no matter what you hear. The fact that he didn't deny the footsteps sent chills through her bones. Who is it? She asked. His jaw clenched. This house remembers things, even when people don't. Abram was Clara. Enough. His voice cracked sharply, startling her. He closed his eyes, breath shaky. Finally, he said quietly, I won't lose another wife to the canyon. Evelyn froze. Lose another? Abram opened his eyes filled with a pain that looked older than the house itself. A storm is coming, he murmured. When it breaks, she comes with it. Who? He didn't answer. He simply walked away, leaving Evelyn to wonder. Was Clara seeking vengeance, justice, closure? Or was the canyon itself whispering lies that tore the Colt family apart? Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain. This was no ordinary house, and Clara Colt was no ordinary ghost. And the terrifying thing Judge Abram Colt had done? Evelyn had only begun to uncover the first layer. The morning sun crept slowly above the mesa, spilling pale gold across Blackwater Ranch, like paint brushed by a hesitant artist. The wind that carried dust and secrets drifted calmly now, but Elena felt a storm rising inside her, a storm built of days of silence and a truth she no longer had the strength to bury. Judge Silas Thornwell rode ahead of her on the narrow canyon trail, his tall, rigid frame outlined against the burning sky. The man looked carved from iron, stern, cold, unbreakable. Elena watched him without being seen, her pulse flickering every time his hand brushed the holster at his hip. She had once admired the way he carried himself. Now she feared it, because now she knew what he had done, and what he still might do. But fear was not her only companion. Right beside it rode something unexpected, something that felt suspiciously like hope, disguised as a cowboy named Colt Avery. His words echoed in her memory as the horses picked their way through the dust. If you ever need someone who ain't afraid of him, you look for me. At the time, she hadn't dared believe him. Now she did. 1. The road into the canyons. Silas had said they were riding out to survey cattle losses after the storm. But Elena knew the truth behind his tight jaw and clipped tone. He wanted her away from town, away from prying ears, away from Colt. The walls of the canyon grew taller the deeper they rode, closing in like a tightening fist. Ravens circled overhead, their cries sharp enough to pierce bone. Elena's fingers trembled on the reins, but she kept her expression calm, almost serene. Silas liked calm. He liked quiet, obedient, collected. So she gave him that mask. Silas finally spoke, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "You avoided my questions last night." "I was tired," Elena answered softly. "You're tired very often these days." He didn't look at her, just kept riding forward, eyes fixed on the canyon's throat. "You've changed. You speak less. You move differently. You look guilty." Her heart lurched. Not guilty. Terrified. Silas slowed his horse, turning toward her at last. His gaze was sharp, sharp enough to slice through lies and hope alike. "Tell me the truth, Elena. Who were you talking to behind the barn yesterday?" Her breath caught. He'd seen. Colt had warned her Silas saw everything, but she hadn't wanted to believe it. "No one," she lied. Silas's jaw tightened, but he didn't press further. Instead, he nudged his horse ahead again, expression unreadable. But Elena knew one thing clearly. They were alone, deep inside a canyon, and he had brought her here for a reason. 2. The man behind the gavel. People in town called Silas Thornwell a hero, an honest judge, a righteous leader, a hard but fair man. But the legend they admired was only half the truth. Elena had learned the other half. She had found letters Silas kept locked away in a red cedar box she was never supposed to touch. Letters written to a man imprisoned years ago, a man Silas had condemned at trial. Those letters had revealed something terrifying. Silas had framed him. He had lied in court. He had sent an innocent man to rot in a cell. And worse, Silas feared Elena knew. Because one letter was missing, the one she had accidentally dropped behind the bookcase. Silas must have found the gap, must have counted the pages, must have realized the truth. Now she felt his eyes lingering on her again, reading her silence like scripture. "Elena," he said quietly, too quietly, "you know I've always protected this land, this ranch, this family, even when others didn't understand my decisions, even when they questioned my methods." His horse stopped. Elena stopped too. Silas's tone dropped lower, colder. "You wouldn't be questioning them, would you?" She swallowed hard. No. A lie so fragile it trembled in the air like a dying candle. Silas slowly dismounted, boots crunching on the gravel. "Come here." Her blood chilled, but she slid off her horse, feet hitting the dirt, hands slick with fear. The canyon air tightened around them. Even the ravens went silent. Silas stepped forward, not to strike her, not to grab her, but to touch her cheek. And somehow that terrified her more. "Elena, I know you're young." His voice softened, but not kindly. It softened like a predator soothing prey. And the young get confused, misled, influenced. His thumb brushed her jaw, making her spine stiffen. "If someone has been putting thoughts in your head, about me, about this ranch, you will tell me." Her pulse hammered so loud, she worried he could hear it. "No one," she whispered again. Silas stared at her for a long moment, long enough for the canyon shadows to grow deeper around them. Finally, he stepped back, and that was somehow more frightening than if he'd stepped forward. 3. A gunshot in the canyons. The silence shattered. A distant gunshot ricocheted through the canyon, echoing like a warning fired by fate itself. Silas's head snapped up. "Stay with the horses." He didn't wait for her reply. He grabbed his rifle and stalked toward the canyon's eastern ridge, boots grinding against stone. Elena's breath came in jagged bursts. A chance. A small one, but a chance. She gripped the saddle horn, so tight her knuckles blanched. Her eyes scanned the canyon walls. The horses shifted uneasily. The world felt suspended, balanced on the razor edge between danger and escape. Then something moved in the shadows. Footsteps. Slow, measured, purposeful. Elena turned and saw him. Colt Avery stepped out from behind a boulder, dust on his boots, determination in his eyes. "Don't scream," he whispered. "It's just me." Her knees nearly buckled with relief and panic. "Colt, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be." "I followed you," he said simply. "I had a feeling he'd try something." Elena shook her head frantically. "If he finds you." "He won't. Not unless I want him to." Colt's voice was steady, but his eyes were burning. Angry. Protective. "Did he bring you out here to scare you?" Colt asked. "Or to silence you?" Elena's breath hitched. Colt read the answer in her silence. He cursed under his breath. I'm taking you out of here. No, Colt, you don't understand. He'll come back any second. That's why we have seconds, Colt replied. He reached for her hand. And for a moment, just a heartbeat, Elena let herself imagine taking it. Running. Escaping. Breathing free for the first time in months. But reality struck like a whip. I can't leave, she whispered. Not yet. Not until I have proof. Proof of what he did? Colt asked. Elena nodded. Colt's jaw tensed. Then we get it. Together. But before she could reply, a shadow stretched across the canyon floor. Silas. Returning. For the confrontation. Colt vanished behind the rocks in an instant, silent as smoke. Elena forced her shaking hands to unclench, turning toward the approaching footsteps, just as Silas emerged from the ridge. There was no trespasser, he said, annoyance curling every word. Probably just an echo. His eyes drifted to her hands, her trembling hands. Elena, he said slowly. What happened? She tried to answer. Failed. Silas stepped closer, eyes narrowing. You're frightened. It wasn't a question. Why? Her throat closed. He reached for her arm. A voice thundered across the canyon. Judge. Silas spun around. Colt stood atop a rock ledge, rifle slung across his shoulder, body relaxed but eyes sharp. Silas's face hardened into stone. You're trespassing on my land, Avery. Colt smiled coolly. Funny, Judge. Thought the canyons belonged to God, not you. I didn't ask your opinion. Didn't offer it, Colt replied. Just came to return something. Silas stiffened. Return what? Colt's gaze flicked to Elena, then to his coat pocket. My God, Elena thought. The missing letter. Silas saw that flicker too. His hand dropped instinctively to his gun. Colt didn't flinch. You dropped this behind the feed barn, he said casually. Figured it might be important. Silas's face drained of color. Elena saw it, really saw it. The first crack in his iron control. What did you read? Silas demanded. Nothing that a fair judge should be afraid of, Colt said. Silas's hand tightened around his holster. Elena felt her lungs collapse. This was it. It was going to end here. In a canyon where no one would ever find their bones. Silas's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. Give it to me. Colt stepped closer, not toward Silas, but toward Elena. And Elena realized. He wasn't here to challenge Silas. He was here to defend her, even if it cost him everything. No, Colt said simply. 5. The truth that saves. What happened next unfolded faster than breath. Silas drew his gun. Elena cried out. Colt stepped forward, raising both hands, not to draw, not to threaten, but to shield Elena with his own body. Shoot me, Colt said, voice low but unshaken. But you won't silence the truth. Not anymore. The canyon wind howled between them. Silas's finger trembled on the trigger. Trembled, because the mask he had worn for decades was finally cracking. Elena, he said. But it wasn't a threat. It sounded like a plea. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, she whispered. You built your life on lies. Silas's face twisted, fear, anger, pride, guilt, all warring in his eyes. But he didn't shoot, because deep down, he knew he was beaten. Colt held out the letter. Take it, he said, and face what you did. Like a man, not a judge. Silas stared at him, at Elena, at himself. Slowly, painfully, he lowered the gun. And for the first time in their marriage, Elena saw the truth. Silas Thornwell was not a monster. He was a man terrified of being exposed. Terrified of the world, seeing what he truly was. And terrified of losing the last person who believed in him, even if that belief was long dead. 6. The beginning of the end. Silas didn't speak as they rode back. Colt stayed behind in the canyon, giving Elena a final look, one of promise, not farewell. You know where to find me, he said quietly. Silas said nothing the entire ride home. He didn't touch her, didn't question her, didn't threaten. He was silent, dangerously silent. And Elena knew. A decision had formed in his mind. Something irreversible. Something that would change all three of their lives forever. That night, as thunder rolled over Blackwater Ranch, she lay awake listening to Silas pace the hallway. Each heavy footstep carried guilt, regret, and something darker. Tomorrow, she realized, Silas would choose his fate, and she would choose hers. Only one of them would walk away unchanged.